Hi guys, Deb Acker here, back with another video. And the title of today's video is all around the art of being single. So first and foremost, is there an art to being single? For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm an intuitive coach and I work mainly with women to help them to heal their past, heal their childhood patterns, specifically around abandonment and the abandonment that can show up when we have physically and or emotionally unavailable parents, whether that's through a parent working a lot or being emotionally unavailable in some way, or even deeper through a divorce, through the loss of a parent and or through addiction that can occur in the household, right? So just notice what pieces of that you can relate to. But when I started to look, so every day, actually, just so you guys understand a little bit of my process, it's actually pretty fun. So much of the time, that ways that I actually get my ideas for these videos, it's all through my guides. So today, when I got home from my walk, I asked my guides, I was like, what should I do a video on today? And they write messages to me in my head. So they started to spell out the art of being single. And I was like, what is that? What is that about? And what does that really mean, right? And then as I dove deeper into this, I was like, wow, this is going to be a really, really fun topic to talk about. So first and foremost, if we look at, sort of being single in our childhood, obviously we were not dating when we were little kids, right? But if we look at being single in our childhood, what this really meant was a lot of times we were lone riders, right? Especially if you had a parent that was unavailable in some way, a lot of times the way that you learned to cope, right, was really being on your own, or sort of the expectation of being on your own. And of course, if you had a sibling, that may not be true, but just sort of being willing to open and look at the ways in your life that you may have been on your own, may have been quote unquote single, right? So with this, what ends up happening is that sets up a paradigm for how we live our life, right? If we're used to doing things on our own, if we're used to being really independent, and or if our model is to see unhealthy relationships or unhealthy relationship dynamics, right, in our life, right, that sets up our paradigm, right? And so then we go out into the world and we try to create relationships and we struggle. Right. So again, notice if you can relate to that. It's something in my past I can absolutely relate to, and so from there, noticing, when you think about being single right now at this point in your life, do you have any resistance to it? Right? Is it something that you want at this point in your life, that you're happy with, and or do you have resistance to it and it's something you don't want? Being very honest with yourself, right? A lot of times we're like, oh yeah, I'm cool, I'm fine being single. But if that's not really true for you, really recognizing that and being willing to open to that and being willing to honor that, right? And so with this, part of our journey and part of our path, right, is not only starting to really be with that resistance and lean into that resistance, because once we're able to actually acknowledge it, and when I say lean in, it's like, okay, can I, even for 15 seconds, sit in the discomfort of, I don't really want to be single, but I'm single right now. Right? So if you can just sit in that discomfort and even saying out loud, what that resistance is about, like, I don't want to be single anymore, right? And if you just said that out loud several times, not cementing it in, but seeing it leaving your body, that can help you to create a shift. So with this though, what I want you to look at is why at this point in your life, especially if you don't want to be single, why do you think that you are single? Right? For me, I can tell you my journey of being single, like unbeknownst to me when I first started this. And if you had told me when I was first getting started, like in my early 20s, right? If you told me, oh, you're going to be single for a long time, I would have resisted it. And I would have said, no, that's not true. Right? And of course, I've had relationships during that time, right? But a majority of that time was spent, being single. And part of that, and again, notice if this is true for you, but part of that, for me was one piece around it was not wanting to settle, right? So again, noticing, okay, for you, if you feel like that's true, right? And that's awesome, right? I mean, it actually takes a lot of courage, right? It actually takes a lot of cojones to make that decision. You're not going to settle and just settle into sort of the first person that shows up in your field, and or you're not going to settle into the societal pressures, right? Or some timeline that you've created or someone else has created that you're supposed to be married and have children or whatever by a certain date and age, right? So go ahead and pat yourself on the back for that if that is something that's true for you. But as part of this, starting to recognize, for me, a huge part of that, and I didn't know this at the time, and it does take us being willing to, start to do work on ourselves, to really start to acknowledge this and really open to this. But I was always meant to have a different path with this, right? I was not meant to get married, in my 20s or even into my, 30s, right? I was meant to do a lot of work, a lot of growth work on myself, right? To really heal certain pieces. And then from there, to open to that relationship. And that was something that my soul had set up for me. And again, that may or may not be true for you. And you may or may not have full sort of awareness or identification around if that's true for you or if that's something that you have awareness around. But I can tell you, some of the pieces I've had awareness around, even since I was a little girl, was that I was meant to have this amazing, incredible relationship, right? It wasn't just meant to be okay or mediocre or sort of like on the personal growth path, I would say, a third of the way there or anything. It was meant to be, I did a ton of healing work. And I also, meet someone that also has done their work on themselves, right? And then we create an incredible partnership together, right? So again, notice what your stories might be around that. And if it's a story you've had since you were a kid, that can help you to kind of become aware of that, right? So recognizing, okay, is that a story I learned in my environment? And or is that a story that I have from when I was a kid because that's sort of something that was sort of deeply buried in my soul, right, that I knew to be true, right? Either one of those can apply, but just becoming aware of that, and that's how you start to really identify your soul stories, or at least one way, besides doing some healing work on yourself. That's a huge way that we start to connect to and open to our soul, right? And with this too, we have a tendency, and society has a tendency to, make being single wrong, right? So notice any judgments you have around being single. Notice any judgments you see from other people in your life around being single, right? Whether that's a parent or a sibling or a friend, noticing all of those. A lot of times if someone else is reflecting this, it's because it lives in you, right? So it is important to look at those and to really honor those. And again, can you love the part of you that's single, right? With this too, I know at some point on my journey, I did have like that sort of sadness around, oh my God, I'm not going to be single for that much longer, right? And so there can be this shift that happens, right? Where initially we're resisting it, and then all of a sudden it's like, you're like, oh my God, this is, that chapter of, my life is closing, right? And it can kind of shift that paradigm. So that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind. And with this too, just acknowledging, being willing to get comfortable where you are, right? To really, get comfortable with that piece of you. And again, that practice of, can I love those pieces of me, right? Can I love the single part of me? Can I love the part of me that doesn't want to be single, right? And also, can I acknowledge that being single, a lot of times being single, if you're single for a longer period of time, it does take you on a growth path, right? And so again, that could be a huge part of your soul's path and your soul's journey. So that's today's video. If you're enjoying these videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Also too, if you're diving into a healing path and you're looking specifically around how do I heal, this abandonment pattern from having physically and or emotionally unavailable parents, right? I have a free kit that's out called Healing Through Abandonment, and it's got so many tools on how do we connect to ourselves, how do we gain that sense of self, that strong sense of self, right? And find the truth within, go within and really go on that healing journey. So the link for that is below as well, but you can get it at bit.ly/healingthroughAbandonment, all lowercase. And you can find out more about me and my work at deboraacker.com. And there as well, you can, I have a 15-minute complimentary catalyst conversation where we can talk about where you are, where you want to be, and how I can help you to get there. So thanks so much for watching. And until next time, have a great rest of your day.